I'm here with Clement Chu, who is working here with Garena, and he's known for his analytical ability and his devotion to the LMS region. First of all, everyone is probably thinking about the fact that 2 LMS teams managed to get out of the group stage. I heard before that you were kind of expecting that, but could you explain how it all shook out, since I think few things went according to plan for most people?
Well, at the start of the group stage, we actually knew that we had some of the easier groups. I think that's not really debatable in the sense. And also, because we had information on how the teams were currently doing, we understood that they were actually doing pretty well. HQ is the opposite. We actually didn't have very high expectations for HQ, but for Flash Wolves, we knew that they were doing tremendous in terms of like scrimming ability. And Flash Wolves have always been a team who's kind of, they don't do very well if they're expected to win, like against Pain Gaming. But if the pressure is on and they can just treat it like a normal scrim, then we knew that they were a very, very strong team, even compared to like the second, third Korean seeds.
What for you was probably the most surprising result?
Surprising results, let's see. We knew that Flash Wolves had a pretty good edge on Coup Tigers. They personally thought that way. We were actually surprised that CLG got knocked out of the group so fast, because the bot lane of Double Lift and Afromu, like a lot of the Taiwan teams when we played them, we're always complaining that, you know, that lane's unbeatable. Like they just go straight through you. But I guess mentally CLG kind of faltered, and they in the end did make it out of groups. Our own prediction would have been CLG and Flash Wolves from the first group. Group B was really close. I think we were a little bit surprised at how IG kind of they didn't really. I don't think they showed up fully. I don't know. The issue might be catering, might be nerves or something, but they didn't do as well as we expected.
Now, you mentioned the result of the Flash Wolves versus Coup Tigers. I've sort of been wondering about Flash Wolves. You know, they did falter a lot against Pain, and they did well against the Coup Tigers. You said that if the expectations are, I guess, not on their side, then they perform. Is that all there is to it, or do they have a really, really good stylistic matchup against Coup?
Well, they actually do, and I think Coup Tigers actually messed up quite a lot. According to Flash Wolves' own opinion, that they're significantly stronger in terms of the mid and jungle, these 2v2, which is something that Flash Wolves have always relied on. They face each other a lot in solo queue, and they know the habits of these players quite intimately. They know how good they are, so they're able to make plays around that. And we've seen Maple just go off on LeBlanc, and it's also quite significant that they picked up on this strategy to force the opponent not to bring teleports. They wanted to play that hard 2v2 and just punish someone if they went the teleport. So I think they kind of caught Coup Tigers off guard a little bit there. And also I feel like Stake was, a lot of people didn't know much about Flash Wolves. They knew Stake that isn't a tremendous top laner, and a lot of people picked him to be last in the group just because of Stake. And I think teams really underestimated him. According to like Fluidwin, which is the Flash Wolves analyst, what Stake is good at is that he's never gonna just implode. Like he's always going to be there. He's going to be significantly behind, and a lot of times people give him a lot of crap for being behind in CS tremendously. But if you look at the way the Flash Wolves work, all that farm is going to either Maple. He's like taking the bottom lane even without a teleport. It's going to NL, and it's more of a team dynamic rather than just Stake is a bad player.
Speaking of players that I didn't necessarily have really high expectations for, NL, Flash Wolves AD carry, he performed a little bit better than expected. Could you give me your assessment of him?
Well, the thing about NL is that he's always been pretty good mechanically, but he's been criticized for having poor positioning in key moments. And I think like having Kramer there and just like showing him a good mechanical play has really improved him a lot. This is something that he mentions himself. And also I think it's just the maturity of the players starting to show up, you know. Flash Wolves is a very, very young team. Like Sword Art, and like Maple, they're all under 18 players, under 18. So we're really seeing the maturity come out a bit of Flash Wolves more. And
regarding AHQ, we had, as expected, a strong performance from Ziv, but a lot of people rated Ziv highly, but AN really, really showed up, especially today. How do you feel about his performance?
Well, we were really worried for Ann because this is kind of like a top lane meta, and we were worried that without the same jungle pressure coming from Mountain that he would just implode. But I think he toned it down in the big tournaments. Ann has always been this type of player where he does pretty horribly in scrims and everyone's like, oh my god, we're screwed. But he always shows up in the big tournaments. He's kind of like the big moment type of player. And honestly, he elevated his play beyond our own expectations this time.
He got to play Jinx quite a bit. Do you think that that's going to be something people have to look out for in the future?
Well, Jinx is an interesting carry in that it allows AHQ, who's usually more of a fighting team, to have like a protect the carry composition to run as well. We've seen this in the spring playoffs, and that's what they reverted back to kind of a lot. So I think they're familiar with this composition, and after seeing Flash Wolves run it so successfully, they also discovered the Tahm Kench pick, and they were just happy to do that combo. Talking
a little bit more about some of the picks, we've been banning Mordekaiser and Gangplank almost every single game, and the times it has gotten through, it's won. Do you think that these picks are counterable, or what strategy, if you're playing red side, would you kind of approach this from?
Well, to give some general information, the reason like purple side needs to ban these two picks every time is if you leave them both open, Gangplank counters Mordekaiser because Mordekaiser has go in, you just drop your barrels, so it creates this really bad ban pick situation for purple side where they often can't play their compositions. A lot of players have said that this Worlds is really about team play and just thinking about how you want your composition to work. NA, EU surprised a lot of people just because they ran a strategy that the Eastern teams didn't see before. They didn't really knew it existed. And giving that type of ban pick advantage to blue side, I think it even shows on the win rates. It makes the game quite lopsided. And I really hope that Riot can just fix these two champions in the future patches.
Do you think there's any chance of maybe them seeing global bans in further stages of the tournament, or are we just going to repeatedly see the red side double ban?
I think they're just going to be banned over and over again. The thing about Mordekaiser is that even though he's he kind of creates this situation where you have to take care of him. He's like a bomb in like Magic the Gathering terms, is that he grows on himself. If you lane swap against him to avoid that very hard lane, then he just takes a dragon and starts pushing down your turrets. If you don't lane swap against him, he can constantly wave clear. Your only window to really win against him is to try to find like early openings, try to mess up his strat, because we know that he usually takes Krugs or Gromp and gets to the early level too. I have a lot of issues with the Mordekaiser design as well. I don't like the W passive. I feel it's like way too top down. It's creating a new meta, not by like bending the rules. It's just saying the rules don't apply to this champion. So I have a lot of issues like design-wise and gameplay-wise. I think he's very limiting in how you can face him, and he's just too powerful.
Just talking a little bit more about, the meta or creating a new meta, a lot of teams have been struggling, and they've brought up again and again, we're not prepared for the patch and the big patch changes. What are two, I guess, meta-related mistakes that seem to be giving teams the most trouble?
Well, I think the first one this is something I talked to Mithy about yesterday in our interview, is that there's a lot less hard CC nowadays. Like the Annie stun's been nerfed, the Braum obviously nerfed as well. So in turn what that happens is that frees up a lot of mid laners to bring teleport instead of something like cleanse. And that allows for a lot of like pushing strategies where you can group somewhere and still defend something else. And also, just because the lower duration of stuns in general, it's very hard to punish teams that are just sitting there and just trying to push in your turrets. I think C9 showed this very well. They ran like the Veigar, Morgana, Elise composition. If they just set up, there's very little you can do to them. I think IG gave a good counter, which is Lissandra, which you can dodge the event horizon. But other than that, there hasn't been terribly good answers to this type of meta.
And would you have a second one, or is that your major one?
I also think that in general, fighting teams have been severely weakened. I think coming into this patch, a lot of people assumed that the big top laners the bruiser top laners were going to dominate the gameplay, but so far hasn't really been the case. Of course, you could point to some like individual mistakes, like Huni he's not that stable, I'd say, and then like AHQ not being able to transition completely over to that meta. But I think the top lane bruiser, even for me, I think I overestimated how much effect it would be, especially in IG. Like, it's a Taika call. They should have been a lot better, but it didn't turn out that way. The A, if you could still punish the bottom side of the map, then it didn't work.
So going into the quarterfinals, they've just been drawn. There have been a few matchups that first we have KT and Ku, then we have Fnatic and Edward Gaming. Following that up, we are going to see Origin versus the Flash Wolves and SK Telecom versus AHQ. Could you give us a little bit of a rundown on how you see those matches coming out?
KT and Ku Tigers, that's interesting because they're both very familiar with what they run. Like just coming into at Worlds, the teams from the same regions, they practice each other a lot. So I think there's going to be a lot of surprising picks that we don't necessarily know because they know champion picks that we've never seen before and they've never used. So I think that one's going to be like harder to say. I'm leaning more toward KT. I think Flash Wolves is right in that the mid jungle aren't really that spectacular for Ku Tigers, but also on the flip side, I think KT's bot lane isn't as strong compared to Gorilla. So I'm not 100% sure, just kind of a toss-up. The second one, Fnatic versus EDG, I actually think Fnatic looks like a bit, they look a bit lopsided, to be honest. What they're doing right now is they're pretty much going all in on the Huni Reignover composition, and they're trying to snowball from the top lane. And we saw today in HQ's game is that what often happens is they let their bot lane die a lot. Reckless is just going to play something safe, something he can peel for himself like Kennen, which is I find kind of hilarious. EDG as a team, I think they can read Fnatic very well. I'm not sure they're going to have good matchups, but on the flip side, Amazing J is also not as stable. I'm not sure why they aren't running Koro. I'm not terribly sure what the issue is there, but it's shown in the previous games that Amazing J has some like experience issues with when he needs to back off or how he needs to control the minion waves. So if Fnatic can take a huge advantage on top, then they have a possibility to win, but I'm leaning more toward EDG. Origin versus Flash, that one's a hard one, I feel. Yeah, because it's just that I think they counter the Flash Wolves a little bit. Like, Expect's not this amazing solo mid. He's just going to farm and constantly push the wave out. He's not going to give you a lot of chances for Maple and Karsa to do stuff there. Their bot lane Niels and Mithy have been playing phenomenally. I think the only way that Flash Wolves actually beats OG is that they can out-strategize them. I think an important one was how KT defeated OG. They ran multiple teleports. Like OG was running 2, they ran 4, and they had initiation on everyone. That's the way you kind of punish OG's style of just constantly pushing the waves and doing chip damage. In Taiwan, we call that style of play old man basketball. It means they never go into the box. They never play like one-on-one. They never try to confront you. They're just outside shooting threes all day. So hopefully they can punish that with some strategy, but I think it's about 60-40 in OG's favor, yeah.
And SK Telecom versus AHQ.
Well, to AHQ's defense, they'd rather face SKT rather than EDG. They had the opportunity to play SKT, and they had wins, even we're not sure how serious that is, but they've never won against EDG, period. So they're like, okay, they're just going to treat this as a championship finals, and if they win it, then, glad for, kudos to them, but probably not. Yeah.
Okay, so thank you very much, and good luck to the LMS teams.
Thank you.